I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd sit alone in her kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at a cold cup of coffee, asking herself if she ever really knew the man she married. But here I am. My name is Linda. I'm 42, a nurse practitioner, and I've been married to David for 18 years. We've got 4 beautiful children, Emily, Ethan, Lily, and little Noah. And for the longest time, I thought we had something close to perfect. Not glamorous, not flashy, just solid, steady love. The kind that grows quietly in the everyday stuff. Dinner at 6, Saturday soccer games, folding laundry side by side. David was the kind of man people trusted. He's thoughtful, soft-spoken, dependable. He writes articles for a living, nothing too exciting. But he's good at what he does. People listen when he talks, especially Laura. Laura's been in his life since they were kids. They grew up on the same street, rode bikes together, went to the same schools, even had matching scars on their knees from when they wiped out on a gravel road at age 9. She calls him my brother from another mother. And back when I was just the new girlfriend tagging along on their inside jokes and shared memories, I believed that. I really did. They always said there was nothing between them. She's family, David told me once, wrapping his arm around my shoulder while Laura laughed from the passenger seat. You've got nothing to worry about, babe. And for years I didn't worry. I mean, what kind of woman would I be if I didn't trust my husband? Laura even became my friend. She helped me decorate the nursery when Emily was born. She stood by my side at our wedding. She's godmother to all 4 of our kids. But here's the thing about darkness. It doesn't crash into your life like a wave. It seeps in. Slow. Quiet. Like a drip from a faucet you didn't notice at first. And then one day, you wake up in a house that feels flooded. For me, the drip started when Laura had her first child. She wasn't married. She never really dated anyone seriously. And when I asked who the father was, she just smiled, shrugged, and said something like, "Life happens. I let it go." We all did. Then she had another, and another, and another. And each time there was no man, no father figure, just Laura and David, helping her. More than helping. Paying bills, checking in, staying overnight at her place when one of the kids got sick. I told myself it was because he was kind, because they were family. But something about it didn't sit right. Something about the way he looked at her kids, held them, worried for them like they were his own. And then one day I looked at one of them, really looked, and my stomach twisted. He had David's eyes. It was a passing thought then, just a shadow. But shadows grow, especially when you've been walking in the dark longer than you realized. I haven't told this story to many people. Some of it is shame. Some of it is fear. But mostly, it's because once you speak it out loud, you can't unsay it. You can't pretend it's not real. But I think I'm ready now. Because something happened that pushed me over the edge. Something that made silence no longer an option. Laura's son asked my daughter out on a date, and if my gut is right, that boy might be her brother. David and I met the way so many people do. In college, over lukewarm coffee and too many late-night study sessions. He was quiet, observant, the kind of man who didn't rush to fill the silence but made you feel seen when he finally did speak. I was drawn to that, still am in some ways. He told me about Laura on our 3rd date, called her his day one, said she was the sister he never had. They grew up 2 houses apart and had been inseparable ever since. There were photo albums full of the 2 of them, Halloween costumes, high school dances, even a matching cap and gown, picture from graduation. At first, I'll admit, it threw me off. I mean, how many men are that close to another woman and insist there's never been anything romantic? But David was always clear. She's family, Linda. Always has been. He looked, me in the eye when he said it, and I wanted to believe him. I did. Laura was warm, funny, with this magnetic energy that made people feel like they'd known her for years. I remember the first time I met her. She hugged me like we were already sisters. No cold glances, no sizing me up. She welcomed me in, easy as breathing. And over time, I let my guard down. She was at every major milestone, every birthday, every holiday, every hospital visit. When David proposed, she helped him pick out the ring. When we got married, she stood right beside me, beaming like a proud aunt. She even officiated the ceremony. She was ordained online for it. That's the kind of person she was, always there, always part of the picture. I didn't see her as a threat. Not anymore. When I gave birth to Emily, our firstborn, it was Laura who held my hand when David got queasy. She cried harder than I did when Emily let out her first wail. Over time, she became so much a part of our life that our kids started calling her Aunt Laura, and honestly, that felt right. She was family. We built a life. David and I, a good one, steady jobs, a house in a quiet neighborhood, 4 beautiful children who filled our home with noise and love and muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. Laura never married, never settled, but she was always nearby, always in our orbit. Then she had her first child, a boy, no partner, no baby shower, just a quiet announcement over dinner one night. I'm going to be a mom. We were surprised. Sure, but we rallied. We helped. Bought baby things. David set up her crib. I brought meals over after she gave birth. We didn't ask too many questions. Then she had another, and another, and another. Each time there was no father in the picture. Just Laura, strong, independent, glowing in her strange, stubborn way. And each time David was there, picking up medicine, fixing her leaky faucet, watching the kids when she needed a break. I told myself it was because he cared, because that's what family does. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But even back then, deep in my chest, something whispered, "You're not imagining this. Something's not right." I hushed the voice, pushed it down with every baby giggle, every shared holiday, every late-night glass of wine with Laura as the kids played under our feet. Because sometimes we don't want the truth. We want the story. We told ourselves when love was new and the world felt safe. It's strange how the smallest things, a look, a laugh, a quiet pause, can stay with you longer than the loudest moments in your life. It started small, always does. I remember one night, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we had just tucked the kids into bed. David stood by the window, phone in hand, staring at it like he was waiting for something. He looked worried. But the second I walked in, he smiled, put the phone down, and asked if I wanted tea. I should have asked. I should have said, "Who were you waiting on?" But I didn't. Because when you trust someone, you fill in the blanks with hope, not suspicion. Then came the little patterns I couldn't unsee once they began. Every time Laura had a problem, a sick child, a flat tire, even a blown fuse, it was David she called. And David always went. Always. Sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes with no explanation. He'd come back tired, quiet. I'd ask how things were. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "You know how she is, always needs a hand." And I'd nod, because yes, I did know how she was. Independent, but chaotic. Loving, but scattered. She didn't plan. She didn't prepare. She lived life like it was a song she was making up as she went along. It was easy to believe she just needed help. But one day when I was over at her place, dropping off some baby clothes, I caught David there, changing the batteries in one of her smoke alarms. She hadn't mentioned it. Neither had he. And yet, there he was. It shouldn't have been a big deal. But the way he looked at her kids, especially Josh, her oldest, it wasn't the way a family friend looks. It was softer, protective, familiar. And then I noticed the way Josh looked back at him, like he knew him, really knew him. At first I told myself I was overthinking. I was tired. Work had been stressful. I was juggling dinner plans and homework, and soccer schedules. Maybe I was just reading into things that weren't there. But then the kids started to grow older, and I started to see pieces, patterns. Little Kaylee, Laura's second child, has the same weird peanut allergy David has. The exact same reaction pattern, same medications, same emergency protocol. Laura brushed it off like it was nothing. "Nah, coincidences happen," she said. "It's not like allergies are rare." And maybe they aren't. But that one? That specific one? It made something deep in me sit up and pay attention. And then came the vasectomy. After we had Noah, our youngest, David and I agreed, no more kids. Our hands were full, and our hearts were content. So he had the procedure done. It was quick, uncomplicated. He healed fast. We still had our private moments, but the worry of another pregnancy was gone. And you know what? That was also the last time Laura ever got pregnant. Coincidence? Maybe. But it didn't feel like one. Every little thing, the way David's parents doted on Laura's kids like their own, the way David showed up for her at the drop of a hat, the way those kids resembled him, it all started piling up like dry leaves on the porch. One breeze, and I knew they'd scatter into a fire, but I still didn't say anything. I smiled at birthday parties. I laughed at inside jokes. I told myself that families came in all shapes and sizes, that love was what mattered. But deep down, something was growing inside me. Not hate, not yet. Just a question. A dark, quiet question I didn't dare say out loud. What if he's their father? There are moments in a parent's life that change everything. A scraped knee, a whispered, "I love you," a graduation cap tossed in the air. And then there are moments you pray will never happen. Like hearing your daughter tell you, with bright eyes and a shy smile, that she thinks she might be falling for someone, and realizing that boy might be her brother. It started on a Saturday afternoon. I was folding laundry, the usual mountain of mismatched socks and inside-out t-shirts, when Emily came into the room, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. "Mom?" she said, sitting beside me. I looked at her and smiled. She looked so much like David when she was nervous. "What's up, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then said it like it was any other teenage question, like she was asking to go to the mall. Josh asked me out. The room went quiet. For a split second, I didn't process it. I thought I misheard her. I thought maybe she was talking about some other boy. But there was only one Josh she spent time with. Laura's son, Josh, who was 2 years older than her. Josh, who'd grown up playing tag in our backyard and sitting at our dinner table. Josh, who might share her DNA. I felt the blood drain from my face. Emily took my silence for disapproval, but not for the reason I had in my chest. "I know he's a little older," she said quickly. "And I wasn't going to say yes until I talked to you. I thought you might be okay with it." My hands froze over a towel. My heart was thudding so loud I could barely hear her. I wanted to scream, "No!" I wanted to say, "Because he could be your brother. Because your father may have lied to all of us." But I couldn't. I couldn't shatter her like that. So I just shook my head and said, "He's too old for you." It was the truth. But not the truth she needed to hear. Emily looked confused, hurt. "But we've known him forever. He's family." Exactly. That was the problem. She thought she was speaking metaphorically. I was thinking biologically, and I couldn't breathe. I told her no. A firm, final no. She didn't argue. Not really. But the confusion and sadness in her eyes nearly broke me. She walked away, and I sat there for a long time, holding a damp washcloth, my fingers trembling. That night, I watched David closely at dinner. I waited to see if he would say something. If he'd catch my eye and know, but he didn't. And when I told him later about Emily and Josh, about how I said no, he just nodded. He agreed, but too casually, like it wasn't tearing him apart. Then came Laura. She backed me up, too, said Josh had no business dating Emily, but she said it like it was just teen drama, like a phase that would pass. It didn't feel like a phase to me. I started watching them. Every interaction, every glance. I saw the way Josh looked at Emily, with longing, with intensity. And I saw how she responded, the blush in her cheeks, the way she didn't pull away when he touched her arm or brushed her hair from her face. They weren't siblings in their minds. They were just two teenagers, caught up in a feeling they didn't understand. But I understood. I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake, wondering what they were doing when they were alone, wondering if they were sneaking out, sneaking kisses, sneaking more. And every time I imagined it, my heart shattered all over again. I wanted to protect Emily. From the truth. From herself. From the terrible possibility that she might fall, in love with someone she can never have. But I couldn't tell her. Because to tell her would mean unraveling everything. Our family, our friendships, our past. And if I was wrong, if David wasn't their father, then I would have ruined it all for nothing. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I waited. And every day, the weight of what I feared grew heavier in my chest. There. Are few things worse than thinking your husband might have betrayed you, but watching your daughter fall in love with the boy who might be her half-brother? That's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. There comes a moment when silence starts to feel like betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. I had swallowed my doubts for years, smiled through holidays, held Laura's babies, kissed David goodnight. I had convinced myself that protecting my family meant pretending nothing was wrong, but after Josh and Emily, I couldn't do it anymore. So one morning, after the kids were all at school, I asked David and Laura to come over. Together. I told them it was important. They both looked confused but didn't ask questions. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one we'd gathered around for birthdays, school projects, Thanksgiving pies. It felt colder now, like it knew what was coming. I looked at them, my husband and my so-called best friend, and I said it straight. I need to ask you something, and I want the truth. David blinked. Laura's fingers curled around her coffee mug. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. Have the two of you ever crossed a line? Their eyes met. Just for a second. But it was long enough. I continued, voice shaking but steady. Have you ever slept together? Is there any chance that any of your children, Laura, are David's? Silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. David spoke first. His voice was soft, wounded. Linda? No, absolutely not. I've never cheated on you. I would never. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Laura's reaction was sharper. Her eyebrows shot up, her voice defensive. How could you even think that? After everything? After all these years? I didn't want to think it, I said, my voice rising. But I've been connecting the dots for years and it all adds up. The timing of your pregnancies, the resemblance, Kaylee's allergy, the vasectomy. Everything. Laura stood, arms crossed. This is insane. I looked at David. His face was tight with hurt. But there was something else. Something I couldn't read. Regret? Fear? You've spent more time with her than you have with me some months, I said. You've raised her children like they're your own. Because they didn't have a father? He snapped, a little too quickly. Because someone had to help. And what about the way they look at you? I asked. The way you look. At them? Laura's face flushed. That's not fair. You're twisting things. I'm trying to untwist things, I said, because right now my daughter is being courted by a boy who may be her brother, and I need to know what the hell is going on. David put his head in his hands. Laura paced, shaking her head. I asked again, softly this time. Just tell me the truth. But they didn't. Not really. They gave me polished denials, neatly wrapped words that sounded rehearsed. Laura acted offended. David looked heartbroken. But I knew. I didn't need a confession. I could feel the truth in the silence between them. That night, when David was asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked through his phone. He'd always kept it close, but this time, he'd left it on the nightstand. Maybe he trusted me too much. Maybe he didn't think I'd dare. I found deleted messages. I recovered them. There she was, Laura, posing, smiling, bare photos, videos, voice notes calling him my love, my boo. There were long letters. Some dated back years. One of them mentioned Kaylee by name. Our girl, it said. My hands went numb. My vision blurred. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. It was real. Everything I feared, everything I'd buried. He had betrayed me for years, and she had let me sit at her table, hold her children, cry on her shoulder, knowing they had stolen years from me. Not just the marriage, not just the trust, but the version of reality I thought I lived in, and suddenly everything made sense. The glances, the excuses, the way they'd circle around each other like gravity. I didn't confront him right away. I just sat there, in the quiet, holding the truth like a loaded gun in my lap. I wasn't sure yet what I'd knew, but I knew one thing for sure. The storybook was over, and I wasn't going to be the fool in the next chapter. You always think that when the truth finally comes out, you'll feel something like relief. But that's not what I felt. When I held the phone in my hands, still warm from David's pillow, and saw everything. The pictures, the messages, the naked truth laid bare in digital form. What I felt wasn't relief. It was grief. It was like watching someone you love die, only they're still breathing beside you. I didn't wake him, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just stood there, quietly, like a woman who had already done all her crying years ago. Just didn't know why at the time. I knew what I had to do, and this time I wasn't hesitating. The next morning, while he was at work, I packed his things. Trash bags, cold and final. I called Paige, my friend and divorce attorney. We had been preparing this moment in whispers for weeks. I told her it was time. By the time David got home, the papers were on the counter. He looked at the bags, then at me. Linda, what is this? My voice didn't shake. You're leaving. He blinked like I'd slapped him. What are you talking about? We can talk. No, I cut in. We're done talking. I saw everything. That was when the lies started to unravel. First he denied, then he deflected, then he begged. But I didn't budge. Because once you've seen your life from the outside, through the lens of betrayal, you can't unsee it. I kept my voice low because our kids were upstairs. But inside I was screaming. And it wasn't just about what he did with Laura. It was that he made me doubt myself for years, that he let me feel crazy, that he built a second life while I built our home. He asked if he could say goodbye to the kids. I said no. Not yet. Not like this. Later that night I sat down with Emily first. She had a right to know. She had been the center of the storm. I told her the truth, gently but clearly, that her father had been having an affair with Laura, and that I had reason to believe one or more of Laura's children might be his. Her face didn't change. Not right away. Then she exhaled. I already knew, she whispered. My heart stopped. What do you mean? She told me that she and Josh had suspected it for months, that they had overheard conversations, seen the signs, that they faked their little romance, the flirting, the touches, to test the waters, to see if David or Laura would react. They were never in love. They were trying to make them sweat. Teenagers, in their own quiet rebellion, trying to expose the truth the adults were too scared to say out loud. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or hug her, so I did all three. Josh later agreed to a DNA test, and while the results haven't come back yet, we both know in our bones what they'll say. But you know what? At this point, it doesn't even matter. The betrayal wasn't just about biology. It was about loyalty. It was about a husband who chose lies over honesty, and a best friend who chose silence over sisterhood. The kids know now. Not all the ugly details, but enough. Enough to understand why their dad isn't living with us anymore. Enough to know that their mom finally said enough. The day he left, my youngest, Noah, asked if Daddy was mad at us. I knelt down, held his little face in my hands, and said, "No, baby, but Mommy isn't going to let anyone lie to our family anymore." He didn't understand. Not fully. But he hugged me, and that was enough. There is a cost to knowing. You lose the life you thought you had, the people you trusted, the version of your marriage you clung to. But you gain something, too. You gain yourself back. And for the first time in years, I can look in the mirror and say, I didn't stay silent. I didn't let it continue. I chose truth, and my children, and myself. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that even when love dies, your worth doesn't. Even when family falls apart, you can still stand. People think the hardest part of a storm is the thunder. But if you've lived long enough, if you've been through real storms, you know it's the silence afterward that cuts the deepest. The quiet that follows the crashing. The stillness. After everything's come undone, that's where I am now. The papers are filed. The truth is out. The masks are off. And yet when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, and I'm left with nothing but the sound of my own breath, that's when it hurts the most. Because I didn't just lose a husband. I lost a friend. History. A dream I thought would last forever. But here's what I've come to understand. Maybe the story was never mine to keep. Maybe I was always just holding it together with duct tape and prayer, trying to preserve a picture that had already begun to fade. I look at my children now, my beautiful, resilient, complicated kids, and I know I did the right thing. Told the truth, even when it shattered everything, even when it meant standing alone. Because sometimes, what saves a family isn't holding it together. It's having the courage to rebuild it, piece by piece, with honesty at the center. And if you're sitting there tonight, maybe in your own kitchen, maybe nursing your own quiet storm, wondering if you should speak up, wondering if it's better to protect the lie or risk the fallout, I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you this. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you deserve a love that doesn't make you question your own eyes. So to anyone out there holding on to a secret too heavy to carry, just know, you're not alone. I've been there. I'm still here, and I'm finding my way forward, one honest breath at a time. Thank you, watching. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you think of your own family, your own choices, your own quiet strength, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We're building a space here for real stories, messy stories, human stories, just like yours. And if no one's told you this today, you are brave, you are enough, and it's never too late to choose yourself.